In my experience, many teams miss out on plenty of opportunities to experiment and adapt their ways of working to something that really suits them and is optimized to their needs and context. Join me in this video as I will explain the similarities of Scrum and Kanban, as well as go through the differences. We will discuss when to use them and explore how to combine them. And we will investigate their boundaries, what's left unmanaged and not described by these two popular Agile frameworks. A big thank you to Teemyco, the sponsor of this episode. Watch to the end to learn more about their amazing virtual workplace and how it enables spontaneous conversations when you work distributed or have a hybrid remote office setup. If you enjoy this video, please click that like button and subscribe. That would mean everything to me. Let's start with some fundamentals. What does it mean to have an adaptive iterative approach to work, i.e. to be agile? The team has an idea on what they want to achieve. A product, service or performance goal, perhaps. But before designing grand plans and diving into all the work, they ask themselves, what's the first small step we can take? What can we build that has some value, solves part of the problem, and that we can learn from? Once built and shipped and feedback has been gathered, they ask themselves two questions. Are we building the right thing? What have we learned about the problems and our users? Should we redefine our goal? Reprioritize? And can we improve the way we do it? Can we collaborate more efficiently? Automate some steps? Change our process? Then they decide together on the next step and what they want to learn from the next increment of their product or service. And once again ask themselves, are we building the right thing? And can we improve the way we build it? And so on, until they are happy with what they have achieved and can move on to another project or feature. As they approach work iteratively, i.e. in small steps, and incrementally, i.e. starting small and then adding to it, the team continuously learns if they're solving the right problem for the user, delivering value. They learn if they have the right mix of people and skills in the team to succeed. Their guesstimates on dates and effort to build improves in accuracy over time. And since each increment is delivered and deployed, at least to a test environment, we early on smoke out technical hazards and problems. And of course, at the center of it all, we have the Agile team. The core unit of almost all modern organizations are the team. That's where the magic happens. An Agile team is on a long-term mission to achieve a collective outcome. It's cross-functional, i.e. collectively has all necessary skills to accomplish the work. The team is small, 5 to 9 members, and each members belong to one team and one team only, 100%. To be able to gel and figure out how to collaborate effectively together, they stay together for a reasonable period of time. It's up to them to design a process, a way of working that is adapted to their needs, and to figure out how to deliver with high quality and how to maintain and care for what they've already built. It's clear to them what domains they own and their boundaries of decision mandate. They have direct and easy access to customers and stakeholders, and they relentlessly work to shorten all kinds of feedback loops to learn and improve. Impact, quality, productivity, speed to fixed effects, and so on. And Agile teams exhibit at least these 4 basic traits. They collaborate, they think, plan, and do as a team, together. They visualize their workflow and their work so that they can discuss on how to improve and how to collaborate. An Agile team has a strong mechanism for helping them with focus, not multitasking or spreading themselves thin. Some way of limiting parallel work in progress. And they inspect and adapt, frequently and regularly, both what they are doing and how they are doing it. So, what about Scrum and Kanban? A brief history recap. What's the origin of these two Agile frameworks? Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber, the inventors of Scrum, draw inspiration from the classic 1986 HBR article, The New Product Development Game. In it, Takeuchi and Nonaka compared a new holistic approach to innovation to the sport of rugby, where the whole team tries to go to the distance as a unit, passing the ball back and forth. In 1995, Jen and Ken presented a paper at a conference in Austin, The Scrum Development Process. Scrum is mentioned for the first time in public. And some years later, in 2010, the first version of the Scrum Guide was published. The Scrum Guide has been revised many times since then. Great read, strongly recommended. Kanban has its origin in Lean, or Toyota Production System, as Toyota themselves calls it. In 2010, David J. Anderson publishes the book Kanban, Successful Evolutionary Change for Your Technology Business, where he applies the ideas of Kanban systems and flow to IT and knowledge work. Calling Kanban a framework is quite a stretch. It's basically just 5 rules. But let's get back to that. Let's summarize Scrum. I like to think of Scrum as a suggested default recipe for how to structure collaboration in a team. Its activities and ceremonies creates a feedback loop in itself. Let's start with the stakeholders. They have needs and requests, and most often strong opinions on what they want or don't want, as they should. Their job is to provide guidance and to offer feedback. Then we have the users. They sometimes have a different set of needs and wishes on the product or service you're building, report bugs, and file creative requests. Let me introduce the first out of 3 roles Scrum defines, the product owner. He or she ensures there is a product backlog that is up to date, has open and continuous communication with stakeholders and other teams, defines the vision, set goals and priorities together with the team, and offers transparency towards the organization on progress, blockers, and forecasts. In the team, we also have the developers and the Scrum Master. The whole team works in iterations called sprints, typically 1 or 2 weeks long. Each iteration, and this is crucial for the learning feedback loop, results in the potentially shippable increment. If we want to, we should be able to go live with what we have built so far. Once demonstrated and put in the hand of our users and stakeholders, that will generate new insights, requests, opinions, and ideas, closing the feedback loop. Each sprint starts with the sprint planning, where the whole team defines a goal for the sprint, pulls as many items as they think they can finish within the iteration, and breaks down each product backlog item, aka user story, to small, well-defined tasks. The planned work don't only originate from the product backlog. A team often receives asks from other teams, have their own ideas, and unforeseen urgent things they need to execute on. Each day in the sprint starts with a daily stand-up, where the team asks themselves, what do we need to collaborate on today to move us one step closer to the goal of the sprint? They share progress, figure out what needs to be done, and who should help whom. At the end of the sprint, stakeholders and anyone else who is curious is invited to a sprint review, where the sprint is reviewed, and to a sprint demo, where new features are demonstrated and feedback collected. And as a closure to the sprint, the team conducts a sprint retrospective, where they discuss how they can work better as a team and agrees to some changes to their ways of working. To help out to facilitate all these ceremonies and to hold the team accountable to their working agreements, we have the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master often finds him or herself navigating the organization to help the team remove impediments. One habit many successful teams have, even if it's not described in the Scrum Guide, is the backlog refinement meeting. Once a week, the whole team looks into the future, discusses long-term strategies, and work with the product backlog to ensure it's fit for fight for the next sprint planning. This meeting is typically facilitated by the product owner. And there you have it, Scrum in a nutshell. As all Agile teams, the Scrum team visualizes their workflow and their work in a Scrum board. Here's an example. We can see the top part of the product backlog, how user stories are broken down into tasks that then goes through the flow dev doing to test review to completed. We can see the overarching goal of the sprint stated, as well as the team's generic definition of done. Kind of a checklist to be used when planning and to check against before declaring the work on a user story to be done. Cool, let's move on and try to summarize Kanban. This is way easier. Scrum has many roles, meetings, artifacts, and rules. Kanban prescribes a very simple approach to work. First, you start with completing something that is being worked on. This frees up a slot. In Kanban, we use the construct of limiting work in progress, WIP. Here we can see that the WIP limit for the doing column is 3. If the team wants to, they are now allowed to start working on something new. This in turn shortens the top 5 backlog, giving room for a new feature, idea, or request. Even though Kanban doesn't describe any required roles, majority of Kanban teams have a product owner doing the usual product ownership stuff. Kanban has 5 simple rules. 1. Visualize the workflow, typically as columns, and the work, the post-its transitioning through the steps of the workflow. 2. Limit work in progress. On this board, we can see that the team has agreed to limit dev to 2 tasks and the total number of tasks in the ready for deployment and being deployed to 3. They might have many ideas and requests, but only the absolute top 5 of the backlog is defined. 3. Measure the average lead time and optimize for a faster flow. Lead time is defined as the number of calendar days passed from when a user story or task enters the board until done. 4. Since Kanban doesn't describe any additional rules, roles, or meetings, we need to discuss and agree on those as a team. How do we decide what to do next? Which meetings should we have? Which roles and what expectations do we have on those? When do we regard something as done? And 5. Improve as a team. Inspect and adapt together. Let's look at a little bit more elaborate example where we can see the power of enforcing WIP limits to ensure a focus on flow, i.e. finished before starting. Here's me. I just finished something and eagerly jump on an item in the backlog I've been excited about for some time. But if I would move that thing to the dev column, I would break the WIP limits, which in our team is punished. I would have to buy pizza for everyone. I don't feel like pizza today. So what can I do instead? I follow the mantra start finishing, stop starting. I join my 2 team members trying to deploy a new model. It turns out that they are struggling, so they really appreciate my help. After some fun problem solving, we get it out in the wild, live in production. But I still can't start on that feature since the dev column is still full. After my other 2 team members rejected my offer to help, I decided to have a go finishing the other ticket in the dev column, which I managed to finish the next day, allowing me to finally start working on the feature I was so excited about. Even though annoyed by our strict discipline on respecting our WIP limits, I do fully understand and value how it makes us so much faster as a team, how it reduces multitasking and prevents things from getting stuck. And it kind of forces us to collaborate more, which I love for so many reasons. Any process can be visualized as a Kanban board. Here is one really complex example. Once visualized, you impose WIP limits, which is going to reveal your bottlenecks. And from there, you start improving your process, tooling, and way of working together as a team. Okay, what do Scrum and Kanban have in common? What's their similarities? I would argue that teams that do Scrum or Kanban both have what I define as an agile approach to work, especially in these 2 aspects. Collaboration. Both Scrum and Kanban teams think, plans, and do as a team. In Scrum, the team constitutes of the developers, Scrum Master, and Product Owner. In Kanban, the team might have any roles that you chose to define, but you improve as a team. And both Scrum and Kanban teams visualize. They have a board that describes their agreed ways of working and their workflow, and the work flowing through the workflow. A Kanban team also visualize and document their rules and policies more explicitly, which I believe is always a great idea, because when you actually talk about the rules of your workflow and what you expect from each other, that's when you learn that you see things differently and that you need to talk it through so that things become clearer and that you agree and can commit to your ways of working collectively as a team. But there are some small and major differences as well. A Scrum team and a Kanban team both have mechanisms to help them focus, to limit their work in progress. A Scrum team achieves this with time boxes. They try not to plan for more than they think they can accomplish during a sprint. And to sharpen their focus even more and to help them prioritize during the sprint, if needed, they have a sprint goal. And when the time box is over, at the end of the sprint, the team stops and reflect, regardless of if they reach their goal or finished the sprint. A Kanban team, on the other hand, achieves focus by limiting the amount of parallel work. With the help of strict WIP limits, they enforce a habit of finishing before starting. Once work has begun on something, their policies ensures they focus on pushing it through their workflow as fast as possible. As a consequence of their different mechanisms for focus, a Scrum team and a Kanban team tends to forecast and predict the future differently with regards to, for example, release dates and when stuff will be finished. A Scrum team typically estimates the user stories in their backlog using relative estimations such as story points or t-shirt sizes. After a few sprints, they learn how much, on average, they manage to finish each sprint. Their velocity. Given their velocity, they can predict when something in the backlog will be done or how much will be done by a certain date. A Kanban team, on the other hand, measures average lead time. With this, they can forecast how long something would have to wait until it enters their board, and once on the board, how many days on average it takes for them to build and ship. And both Scrum and Kanban teams has a pull mechanism built into their ways of working. A Scrum team pulls from the top of the ordered product backlog at the beginning of every sprint during their plannings. The product owner is never allowed to push work onto the team, stressing them to take on as much as he or she wants. No, the team selects as many backlog items as they think they can finish within the sprint. A Kanban team pulls work from the backlog every time something is done. This might happen several times a day or weeks apart. What about slicing? The art of splitting large work into smaller pieces still offers value and can be shipped independently. In Scrum, the work pulled from the backlog during the sprint planning needs to fit within the sprint. That means quite often big items need to be split into several smaller user stories. A team doing Kanban, however, isn't required to slice big items. The work may have any size, small, tiny, big or huge, as long as the WIP limits aren't violated. Everything is fine from a Kanban perspective. However, I strongly recommend slicing big work even if you're working Kanban. It helps you have less variations and deviations in your measurement of average lead time, making it easier to forecast. And it speeds up your learning loops and gives you options to do things in a different order. Kanban thrives best if the work tasks flowing through your board are roughly on the same size. A big difference between Scrum and Kanban is what they are optimized for. Scrum kind of asks the teams to become masters of predictability, to figure out how to become better and better at planning so that their velocity and forecasts become more stable. A team doing Kanban will focus on flow. Once work is started, how can we improve or change our ways of working to reduce our lead time? Furthermore, Scrum almost assumes you're building something big, hence the focus on incremental delivery. Something needs to be potentially shippable after each sprint. Kanban, on the other hand, wants you to ship continuously. A common final step in a Kanban workflow is to deploy to production. What about changes to priorities? In Scrum, the product owner and the team may change the ordering of the backlog as often as they want, but the changes won't have an effect until the next sprint planning. In Kanban, the impact is immediate. Once the next thing is done, the new priorities affects the pulling of the next task. Neither Scrum or Kanban allows for changes to work in progress. We finish what we started. If you want to enjoy an internet flame war, Google cancelling a sprint. Why? Well, I guess it's because of what the Scrum Guide says about it. A sprint could be cancelled if the sprint goals becomes obsolete. Only the product owner has the authority to cancel the sprint. Even though Scrum and Kanban teams have boards visualizing their work, their boards behaves quite differently. A Scrum board is reset every sprint. Just by looking at a Scrum board, you can make an educated guess if it's in the beginning, middle, or end of a sprint. A Kanban board, on the other hand, is continuous. Things continue to flow from left to right, from left to right. And then we have our beloved meetings. The Scrum recipe gives you a lot of scaffolding for free. Meetings that happens on a regular repeating cadence, with clear purpose and outcomes. There's a rhythm to it, one that I actually really enjoy. Teams doing Kanban, of course, have meetings too, but they are generally triggered by events. We schedule or gather for a meeting when something happens. We might call to a user story breakdown and tasking session when we pull a story from the backlog just in time, or when the top 5 is down to a list of 2, we gather for a backlog refinement meeting. And perhaps we only send out invites to a demo once we have 3 or more things ready to be demoed. But to be frank, no team I've ever met does neither Scrum or Kanban by the book. They adapt, pick ideas and mechanisms that suit their needs. Let's explore a few things I've seen spill over from Scrum to Kanban or from Kanban to Scrum. All Kanban teams I've met run daily stand-ups. Because, well, it's proven to be a very good habit for a team to have. And vast majority of Kanban teams steal the idea of having regular retrospectives, perhaps every 3rd week or so. Scrum defines 3 roles. Kanban, none. You may define them as needed, but with very few exceptions, Kanban teams I've worked with do have a product owner and a Kanban master, sometimes even called a Scrum master. And estimations. Actually, a lot of Scrum teams I work with have learned that they don't need or want to estimate using story points, for example. They instead practice slicing big things into smaller pieces until it feels like it's accomplishable within a sprint. And I've met some Kanban teams that play poker planning. Not because Kanban says you have to estimate work. No, because doing estimations using poker planning is a great way for a team to gain shared understanding of the problem to be solved. As a Scrum team, you can use charts originating from Kanban. For example, a cumulative flowchart, a brilliant tool for revealing bottlenecks in your process. And as a Kanban team, if you're asked to make predictions on date and content of a release, perhaps try using a release burn-up chart, commonly seen in Scrum teams. If Kanban sounds like something exciting, a word of warning, a word of advice. Allow me to be perfectly clear. If you have a board like the one next to me here, if you're not measuring lead time, you're not doing Kanban. It's just a fancy to-do list. Without the time boxes of Scrum or whip limits of Kanban, you ain't getting the benefits of either approach. Kanban might sound intriguing and simple. Few rules and fewer meetings than, for example, Scrum. But beware, don't use Kanban as an excuse. You might get rid of estimating things, but trust me, being disciplined about your whip limits is way harder. And you're going to have meetings. But now they will occur less predictable. Sometimes you will have tons of meetings, sometimes fewer. And you will have to collaborate, probably even more. If your whip limits are too loose, allowing each person to work on individual tasks, the core idea is erased. Nothing will prevent you from thrashing progress with parallel work, or to collaborate on things stuck in the workflow. I love Kanban, but you should never see it as an easy way out from the prescriptive world of Scrum. It requires discipline, even more discipline than Scrum. Cool, with that said, when should you use Scrum and when is Kanban more appropriate? This is of course one of those pesky, it really depends. But here are some general guidelines. Perhaps Scrum is a better fit for you if you're working on bigger, complex projects. But if your work is dominated with support and maintenance, Kanban could offer a bigger sense of control. If you aim to maximize discovery and learning, build and learn iteratively, incrementally with Scrum. But if you find it hard to maintain focus and goals for the full duration of a sprint, go for Kanban. This way you can continuously reprioritize work you haven't begun on. Is the project time critical? Scrum offers a structured approach for changing scope and to manage risks. Do you take on a variety of smaller projects? Kanban helps you focus, prevents you from succumbing to multitasking. New to the Agile approach to work? Start with Scrum. You get so much good stuff for free. Once you feel confident, have the courage to experiment. Does your workload vary a lot from week to week? Go Kanban. When the workload is low, pull from the improvement or refactoring backlog. If outcome and impact, being effective, is important, go Scrum. If flow and speedy responses are more important, be efficient, go Kanban. As I said, it really depends. You might recognize bullets on both sides in the list. You have to do the hard work of experimenting, see what works for you, and improve from there. Can we combine them? Have Scrum outside of Kanban or wrapping Kanban around Scrum? Of course. Remember, you as a team have ownership over your ways of working, and you have the mandate to decide on your own process, at least as long as your decisions don't sabotage for others. A popular variation is called ScrumBan. Depending on which link you click when you Google ScrumBan, the definitions will vary greatly. But generally, a Scrum team might base their process on Scrum, but then adds WIP limits both inside and outside of the sprint. Shifts from time boxing to pull and flow. And some meetings happen on a regular cadence, like in Scrum, while others are triggered, like in Kanban. Here's an example of how a ScrumBan board could look like. This team has a backlog, just like in Scrum, but when the team pulls new work, they pull from the top 5 list. They have several WIP limits, 2 lanes for 2 different user stories. If they want to start a new one, they need to finish one they've already started. A combined limit of 3 for things in the doing and the review workflow steps, and then some documented policies for meetings. Backlog refinement meeting every Monday morning. Stand-ups daily. User story tasking just in time, i.e. when a new story enters the board. Retrospectives every second Friday. Demo. Invitations sent out when 3 stories are done and deployed. But the crucial part of it all is, as always, no matter if you're doing Scrum or Kanban or ScrumBan, you regularly inspect and adapt. You discuss, agree and commit to experiments, changes to the way you do things. Try things from Scrum, evaluate mechanisms from Kanban. What happens if we add this? Remove that. Let each choice be guided by the behaviors you want to see. Which questions do you want more of? Less. Try, inspect, adapt. With that said, Scrum and Kanban only offers paths forward for a limited set of challenges. There's an ocean of things left unmanaged, not answered. Scrum and Kanban offers guide how to accomplish things while being agile as a team. How to achieve collective outcomes together with others? Not so much. And neither frameworks offers guidance on how you should mobilize into different teams. What should their missions be? Who should be part of which team? In both frameworks, the team and the product owner is expected to prioritize the things that generate the biggest outcome, value, or learning. But they don't really answer how to go about this. Your sustainable success depends on your ability to balance short-term wins with long-term strategic work. However, you need to figure out the balance. And in some sense, the team is the new knowledge silo. How to share knowledge and help mastery grow cross teams. Guidelines on how to reward talents and efforts. HR stuff? Nope. How to facilitate alignment of goals and negotiate priorities and dependencies between teams? Nope. And once in a while, or quite frequently, if your organization has many dependencies between teams, you will be asked to contribute to cross-company strategic initiatives. How to run these across the company are far beyond the scope of either Kanban and Scrum. To summarize, even though you might have what you need to be effective and efficient as a team, neither framework offers guidance on how to address the larger challenges and problems you face as a collective. That's all I've got time to cover in this video. Now, allow me to tell you about what the sponsor of this episode has to offer. Are you working remotely and miss the sense of belonging an office can offer? Now there's a way to feel part of an office culture and catch up with your colleagues, all without ever needing to schedule a meeting or send a calendar link. Teemyco is a virtual online office, a digital home for your team, department, or even for your whole company. Accessible by app, browser, or your mobile phone. You design your own layout, create rooms, decorate and configure the rooms and spaces according to your different needs. You can even add company branding for that professional feeling. Teemyco becomes your shared home where you hang out during your workday. You move yourself around, just as in a real office, between collaborative spaces, meeting rooms, the kitchen, people's desks, and rooms for private conversations or secluded calls. Move yourself around by clicking where you want to go, and best of all is how frictionless communication and collaboration becomes. You don't have to book a video meeting, fiddle with the calendar. No, when you enter a room, you're automatically added to the video conference of that room. Just switch on your audio camera if you wish to participate. Feel for a social break? Signal that you would like some company and chit-chat by entering the kitchen. As soon as people join you, their feed pops up automatically and you folks can catch up on all the latest office gossip. Once logged into the office, you get an instant overview of everything that's happening and where everyone is at. You can pretty much design the office any way that works for your team in terms of size, branding, and room names. There's a lot of decorations and features to make the place cozy, and special objects for celebrating team wins, birthdays, etc. There's also seasonal objects for times like Easter and Christmas. Teemyco removes that remote work feeling where you feel insecure about reaching out to others. Never feel as though you're interrupting a teammate again. Meet for after-work team drinks and get-togethers, or simply work in silence together while you listen to music or a podcast together. And team collaboration using video is super efficient. You can simplify and speed up decision-making with the use of polls, raise your hand to vote, or to ask quick questions. React with in-call emojis. Some of the amazing features include dual screen sharing and integration with Google Calendar. And there are plenty more. Find out for yourself. Head on over to teemyco.com and try it for free with your team for 14 days. Link below. Thank you. If you enjoyed this video, please click that like button and share this video with your friends and colleagues on social media. And while you're at it, perhaps check out this video or maybe this one. Explore, have fun, be safe.